April 6, 1986, 9-year-old Anthonette Cayedito answers a knock at the door in the middle of the night and is never seen again. Anthonette Christine Cayedito was born on Christmas Day 1976 to parents Larry Estrada and Teresa Penny Cayedito. A fourth grader at Lincoln Elementary School, she is described as a mature, level-headed girl who was very independent and often helped care for her younger half-sisters, 7-year-old Cayedito and 5-year-old Wendy. At the time of her disappearance, her parents were separated and she was living with her mother and sisters at 204 Arnold Circle, a 4-bedroom home just off Route 66 in Gallup, New Mexico. On the night of April 5, 1986, the girls stayed at home with a babysitter while Penny went out with friends to a local bar called Talk of the Town. Penny returned home sometime past midnight, and allowed the younger girls to stay up and play while she and Anthonette chatted. Although the girls had their own bedrooms, the four decided to sleep together in Penny's bed, and turned in at about 3 a.m., now April 6. This is where things start to get murky. According to contemporary news articles, Anthonette and Cayedito were still awake when they heard a knock at the door sometime after 3 a.m. They ignored it at first, but when the visitor rapped the door again, Anthonette got up to see who it was. Cayedito said the man identified himself as Uncle Joe, Penny's brother-in-law, and told her sister, "Hurry, we're cold out here. Open the door." She recalled hearing a woman's voice as well, but never got out of bed to see who it was and quickly fell asleep. The Unsolved Mysteries episode that aired in 1992 tells a different story. In this version, Cayedito and Penny were asleep, but 5-year-old Wendy was still awake and followed Anthonette to the front door. When Anthonette opened the door for Uncle Joe, two men snatched her, forced her into a waiting vehicle, and drove away. Wendy did not tell anyone about this until she was 10 years old, telling detectives she stayed silent because her mother was distraught and she was scared she would get in trouble. A neighbor told police they saw an older model brown truck with New Mexico plates parked in front of the Cayedito home between 6:30 and 7 a.m. They watched the man exit the vehicle and walk to the front door, but it wasn't odd to see visitors' cars at the house at all hours of the day, so the neighbor didn't pay it any mind. The family could not recall knowing anyone who owned a brown truck, and the man remains unidentified to this day. When Penny got up at 7 a.m. to wake the girls for Bible study, Anthonette was gone. She initially assumed that her daughter had left to go look for a neighbor's lost dog, but when she realized that no one had seen her all morning, she began to panic and called police at 11 a.m. However, they declined to file a missing persons report and told Penny to wait another 8 hours to see if Anthonette returned home on her own. Not knowing what to do, she called Larry, who immediately left to help search for their daughter. The official search would not begin until Monday, over 24 hours after Penny had woken up to find her missing. Detectives tracked down the real Uncle Joe, but quickly dismissed him as a suspect when they learned he had a solid alibi. Interestingly, the search for Anthonette soon led to the arrest of a serial child predator who lived in her neighborhood. Several of the neighborhood kids interviewed by detectives brought up a man named Wesley Daniels, a 62-year-old who would sometimes take boys out on picnics and molest them. 2 months after Anthonette's disappearance, Daniels would be charged with 12 counts of sex crimes against 4 children, all boys between the ages of 9 and 14 years old. It was revealed that Daniels was in the neighborhood the day she went missing, but Penny did not believe her daughter ever knew him, and detectives were unable to conclusively link him to her case. He was eventually sentenced to 32 years in prison. Then, on April 12, 1987, the Gallup Police Department received a disturbing 911 call from a young girl claiming to be Anthonette. You can listen to the call here. Dispatcher, Gallup Police Department. Hello, girl, I'm Anthonette Cayedito. I'm Anthonette Cayedito. I'm in Albuquerque. Dispatcher, okay, whereabouts in Albuquerque? Male voice, who said you could use the phone? Girl screaming, sounds of struggle. Dispatcher, Anthonette, where are you? Anthonette? Hello? It is worth noting that the audio does not appear to be the full recording. A local news article from 1987 states that the call lasted a full 40 seconds and that a second voice, possibly belonging to an elderly man, could be heard asking who was on the other line. Penny listened to the recording several times and believed that the voice on the tape belonged to her daughter, based on her screams and the way she pronounced her last name. 3 years after the alarming 911 call, a waitress in a diner in Carson City, Nevada encountered an unkempt couple traveling with a young girl who physically resembled Anthonette. The girl would deliberately drop her fork on the ground, then squeeze the waitress's hand when she returned it to her. When the couple left, the waitress discovered a note that said "Help me. Call police," scrawled on a napkin. None of the 3 diners have ever been identified, and it not known whether the girl was indeed Anthonette. Although Anthonette's case was treated as a probable abduction, Detectives could not shake their suspicions that some family members, particularly Penny Cayedito, knew more than they were willing to admit. Detective Amos Hershaw stated that Penny did not reveal that a number of people had been in and out of the house the night of Anthonette's disappearance, along with other, undisclosed details that the family didn't admit to until the detectives turned up that information on their own. By mid-1987, law enforcement had stopped updating Penny on the investigation, but it is unclear whether they did this because they were suspicious of her or simply did not have any news to report. On April 18, 1999, Penny passed away from a combination of liver cirrhosis and cardiac issues. Detectives went to interview her on her deathbed, but she died before they could speak to her. There have apparently been no major developments since Penny's death in 1999. Theories: was Anthonette whisked away by someone posing as her uncle, or was her disappearance an inside job? Were the 1987 phone call and restaurant sighting really her? Some things to consider. The strongest evidence we have for the abduction theory seems to be Sunita and Wendy's testimony, but it is extremely odd how the story changed from Sunita heard Anthonette answer the door but fell back asleep to Wendy followed Anthonette to the door and watched her be abducted. Wendy has stuck to this story, even now as an adult in her 30s. Did the local paper simply confuse Sunita and Wendy? Were both girls awake? Or were they coached to tell this story to law enforcement? Penny is long dead, so if their initial stories were coached, they have had almost 20 years to come clean with what really happened to Anthonette that night. An important detail that is often overlooked is that the Cayeditos had a screen door directly in front of their normal front door. This strongly suggests that Anthonette knew, or at least recognized, her abductor, because if she had opened the front door and didn't recognize the visitor, why would she then unlatch the screen door for them? And here's another question to think about. There have been cases of predators abducting children from their homes in the night, but those cases involve the perpetrator sneaking into the house unnoticed. How much sense does it make for a child predator to go to their victim's house and knock at the door at 3 a.m.? At that time, your victim is probably going to be asleep, their parents is home, and it's much more likely that said parent is going to answer the door and ask what the hell you want at this time of night. How would this person know that Anthonette was awake and would answer the door at 3 a.m.? It appears that the detectives never cleared Penny of wrongdoing in her daughter's case. According to Detective Hershaw, Penny neglected to mention that people were in and out of the house all night, which makes you wonder who was there and why she wasn't forthcoming with that information. There have been rumors that Penny was involved with drugs and bought a sports car the week of her disappearance, which is odd since she and the girls lived in a low-income area, but I was unable to find any information confirming either of these. However credible those rumors are, it is very interesting that law enforcement decided to pay her a visit on her deathbed. Were they gunning for a last-minute confession? Lastly, was the 911 caller Anthonette? Penny did identify the voice as being her daughter's, but it could have been wishful thinking or a deliberate attempt to throw off law enforcement. However, what's curious is that Anthonette said she was being held in Albuquerque, but she called the Gallup Police Department. Why would the call go through to Gallup and not Albuquerque PD if she was truly being held captive there? Thanks for reading. I'd love to know you guys' thoughts. What happened to Anthonette Cayedito?
To me, it's similar to the Haley Cummings disappearance. The parents and immediate circle know which insider did it, but nobody wants to fess up to I was on something, hanging out with shady people and not watching the kid until it was too late.
Agreed. It's suspicious to me that she may have been staying up with her mother alone that night, and apparently thought answering the door at the time was normal. Anthonette really gets to me because I can't shake the idea that the people who were supposed to care for her may have betrayed her.
Just as a counterpoint to the even if I was involved in something shady I'd tell all to try and get my kid, Penny had 2 other children. Perhaps the fear of losing custody of them, and thus having no children left, made her keep quiet about stuff that may have helped the investigation. Not that I'm convinced either way to her guilt or innocence.
I've always thought the call was from Anthonette, but I'm iffier on the waitress sighting. I would think if it was AC, she'd have left her name or some sort of identifier.
She seems to have been a smart, resourceful girl. She's one of those that I do hold out a bit of hope that she may be alive and well, though I know that's not the most likely option.
The child predator being in the neighborhood is highly suspicious, but he had a solid history of only molesting boys. Perhaps he had an acquaintance in town that day with the same proclivities who had noticed Anthonette? Otherwise I don't put the child molester/kidnapping theory too high on the list. The fact that the mother was never cleared and police actually went to visit her on her deathbed is pretty telling that they definitely suspect she was taking information to her grave. I think all of this is way too shady to be a stranger abduction.
Something I never thought about when it comes to the one waitress sighting is, If you drop your fork on the floor of a restaurant, wouldn't the waitress bring you a new one, not just hand it back to you? I'm probably nitpicking and I'm not saying she's lying, it just struck me as odd.
So, what's your theory on what happened? Post it in the comments below. Thank you for listening. You can find the original post in r/unresolved mysteries through the link in the description box below. I like being able to listen to posts when I'm busy doing something else and can't read them. So I made this video for anyone who wants to listen to their Reddit posts. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and don't forget to hit the subscribe button below to get more puzzling mysteries.